And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So today I'm joined by Dave Gilbert, and today we are going to talk about the Blackwell series of adventure games.
Hello.
Hello. So we'll start things off with an introduction of you.
Introduction of me. Well, my name is Dave Gilbert. I am from New York, lived here most of my life. I started Wadjet in 2006 because I decided I wanted to make adventure games for a living and kind of started it as a way to avoid getting a real job. And 15 years later, I am still doing it. We're known for uh, lots of stuff. The stuff I've developed as well as stuff I've published. There's the Blackwell series, Unavowed, Gemini Rue, Resonance, Primordia, Shardlight, Techno Babylon, Golden Wake, uh, and so many other lots of others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. We've done a lot, and we are currently working on currently publishing something called Strangeland,
Mm-hmm.
and a game called that's kind of a psychological horror game, a kind of urban fantasy vampire game called Nighthawks, and I personally am working on a time travel story called Old Skies.
Okay. And how did you first discover video games?
Uh, I remember my mom buying me a copy of Wishbringer, which was an Infocom text adventure, when I was 11, um, which must have been in like 1987, I guess. So it was a long time ago, and I played that game, and I kind of fell in love. And there weren't many games you could get for the Apple II at the time, so I played all the Infocom games, and I got into the Sierra games that you could play on the Apple II, and I just sort of been uh, a Gavid gamer ever since. So I guess you could blame my mom for that.
Okay, and what was your favorite game and or games growing up?
Well, like I said, the Apple couldn't play many of the latest things, so I tended to play a lot of text adventures. The Infocom games were my first love. I knew almost all of them backwards and forwards. I loved them. I got into the Sierra stuff a little later, again because my computer couldn't really play them. And then I went to university and then kind of like didn't play any games because I was doing school stuff. But then when I graduated, I actually got a Windows PC and I was able to catch up on all the games I missed. But my favorite games are definitely the Infocom text adventures growing up, for sure.
Okay. And what would you say is your favorite game or games now?
Oh gosh, that answer changes monthly because there's always something new. My favorite game now. Uh I I don't know. It's hard to say because it constantly changes. I recently played through the second Spider-Man game and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Being a New Yorker, it's rare that I play a game that so captures the feeling of being in New York. And I live in Brooklyn now, and because of the pandemic, I can't go to Manhattan. It's the closest I'll get to being able to walk to go around Manhattan now. So that's another favorite. I recently got. I say recently. It was about 5 or 6 years ago now, but I've become obsessed with the Ace Attorney series.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love that series. Um, I guess that's I guess that's about it so far. Yeah, Spider Man and Ace Attorney. Those two.
Okay. And so, in a slightly more ideal world where the pandemic is not happening and things like conventions and such are possible, and let's say like your studio had like a booth, and like a portion of that booth was dedicated to the Blackwell Games, and someone was walking by, what would be the elevator pitch you'd give them as to what those games are all about?
Elevator pitch would be you play a medium and a spirit guide that put lost spirits to rest. Would be the quick, like, one sentence elevator pitch. Um, so yeah, that's basically the Blackwell series. You play a medium and a spirit guide that help put lost spirits to rest, and usually there's some like larger supernatural conspiracy that's kind of happening in the background that you end up getting involved in over the course of that. And there's 5 games in the series, and there's a larger story that ties all 5 of them together. So I guess that's the elevator pitch. I don't know how sexy that sounds, but so yeah.
Okay.
I don't do marketing.
And now, what made you decide to make all of these games point and click adventure titles?
Well, I guess mostly it's that when it's a genre that I grew up playing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a like the language and the tropes of adventure games is something I'm very familiar with. And so when I decided I wanted to, express myself creatively, it seemed like a very natural way of doing it because I was very familiar with that kind of story, and I knew kind of
Whoop.
oh
Ignore that.
and I kind of knew how to make a story like that effective because I was very familiar with the genre. So when I mean it was September 2001. Live in New York. We all know what happened. When the towers went down, I kind of was looking for something to get my mind off stuff, and I had discovered Adventure Game Studio, and it just sort of fell into making little games for fun, just to kind of keep my mind off stuff, and people seem to like them. So I kept doing it, and here I am. Almost, wow, 20 years later, 2021. Jeez Louise. So it's been exactly 20 years since I started making them.
Oh, goodness.
Not professionally, but just for fun. I started making them 20 years ago.
Okay. And like as you said, it's about a medium and her guide like putting lost souls to rest. Was like were ghosts and ghostly themes, was that always like the central focus of the games when you started making them, or did you like partway through the process realize that if you took the games in this kind of direction it would just go better?
I mean, well, it started off. I was kind of inspired by this Hitchcock movie. Oh God, I always forget. I get that. I tell the story all the time, and I keep forgetting the name of the movie. I think it was called Family Plot. I'm not sure, but it was one of the characters in the movie was this woman who was a medium, or at least she said she was a medium. The movie never really goes into whether she's like an honest medium or not. But throughout the movie, she calls on her, because it was a Hitchcock movie in the '60s, her Native American spirit guide Geronimo,
Mm-hmm.
and she would always call on him and ask him questions. And I remember watching this movie thinking, wow, like it really sucks to be Geronimo. He's kind of always at the beck and call of this woman. And I kind of came up with I had the character of Joey kind of came from there. It was like the spirit guide who was tied to someone. And, he always had to kind of like, he didn't have any freedom. He was always tied to this medium. And I kind of came up with that character of Joey, and then I kind of came up with the character of Rosa as a foil for Joey, and it kind of expanded from there. And it's like, well, what do they do? They help ghosts, so that kind of became the main focus of the stories, and kind of the catharsis and the character what's the word, the character studies that kind of come from that. I'm a big fan of an author named Lawrence Block. He's this
Mm-hmm.
mystery writer, and when you read him, it's always character focused mystery stories. Like if you're investigating a murder victim, um, 90% of the story is just the detective going around and talking to friends and family and really painting an amazing picture of the murder victim. And so by the time you get to the end, you really are invested in who this person was. And I took that approach with Blackwell, where you're investigating these ghosts and you talk to like friends and family and people who knew them, and by the time you save that ghost, you really get a sense of who they are and like what their traumas were. And so there's like it was I always thought of approached it as a character study. So rather than using a generic or typical mystery, I used a ghost story instead. So yeah, they were always the main focus.
Okay, and yeah, like how long did, like, on average did it take you to make each game?
Um, God, there really was no average. Each game, let's see. From start to finish, I made Blackwell Legacy in 4 months. Although I had a lot of the design kind of in my head before that. And then I made Blackwell Unbound kind of on the cheap, also in about 3 or 4 months. Um, I made it very much on the cheap because I was running out of money and I needed to get something out very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of pulled that game out of my butt, and yet it sort of become the fan favorite. Everyone loved the second game, but I cut every corner that I possibly could to make that one, just because I needed a game out. So that didn't take long. The next game took maybe a little under a year. It kind of got put on hiatus because I got the gig to do a game called Emerald City Confidential in the middle of it. So my attention was kind of divided. That took a little under a year. Blackwell Epiphany took about a year and a half. And wow, it seems so ridiculously short. So I didn't spend a lot of time on those games. I spend a lot more time on my games now. Unavowed took me 3 years, and I've spent 1 year on Old Skies, and I'm nowhere even close. So games take me a lot longer now.
Okay, and for Joey Malone, did, like, the inspiration for that character, did that come from, like, any one thing, or was it really, like, an amalgamation of, like, some of the various, like, fictional works you've been exposed to over the years?
Well, like I said, he was inspired by that movie, and I guess I was at the time I did a lot of I was doing a lot of ballroom dancing and
Mm-hmm.
swing dancing, so I was listening to a lot of big band music, and so I kind of was really fascinated with that era and those kind of characters, like that kind of man, like, and that kind of outfit, I wore the old fashioned suit and the hat when I went out, so I was really fascinated by that era and those kind of characters. So that was that came very quickly. It was kind of this Bogart Sinatra hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And Rosa was kind of formed as kind of a foil, but also kind of a loosely a very loosely disguised version of myself,
Mm-hmm.
because I had only when I came up with the character, I'd only recently moved to New York, and she was very much like a lot of the way she saw the world was the way I was kind of looking at the city, and I was kind of like nervous about being there and kind of confused and like kind of feeling my way through. And so a lot of Rosa's insecurities matched mine, and as the series went on, like her kind of her growing confidence also matched mine as the series went on. So a lot of it is you know a lot of it is just disguised versions of myself for both characters.
Okay. And um when you like cast the when you cast like a voice actor to voice a particular role, like, What were you looking for when you were looking for someone to voice like Joey and Rosa and the various other characters seen throughout the series?
It's funny. At the time, I got very lucky because I knew so little about casting and working with voice actors at the time. And excuse me, just gonna take a sip of water. Um, and Abe, I always envisioned for Joey. Abe was one of my oldest friends, and he's one of the best, strongest actors I know. And he was like really into that kind of scene as well. Kind of like this. He did a lot of emceeing, and his shtick was like the old fashioned like loungy MC. So I knew he could kind of do that voice. But I just got very lucky. I didn't have a casting process. I just was like, "Hey, want to do this?" And he introduced me to Rebecca, who played Rosa, and she was great. And most of my casting back then was like that. I would meet, someone at a party and be like, "Hey, I like your voice. You want to be in my game?" It was very, very loose. And even the woman who played Lauren was kind of amazing. I met her at a party, and like, it was the most ridiculous thing. Like, I love your voice. You want to be in my game? I record in my bedroom, and I can't pay you. And the fact that she didn't like slap me or laugh at me, or both, was kind of great. She agreed to do the role, so that was awesome. Back then, there was no rhyme or reason to how I did casting. I was just very lucky. Now I have a whole process that I go through, and
Mm-hmm.
I found that voice acting and voice actors, like voice acting, is one of my most it's my most favorite thing to do. I love working with voice actors. I'm kind of fascinated by the whole process, and culture, and the whole the whole process of voice acting. I find it fascinating, and I could talk about that forever if you let me. But I find it like it's almost my reward for getting a game to that point. It's like I can work with voice actors now, and just seeing the game take a life of its own. Like the characters are kind of out of my hands at that point, and the actors kind of take it and elevate the material. That's kind of what I always want from an actor, is that they I don't necessarily want them to nail the role, or like, oh, it's exactly how it is in my head. I don't care about that. I want them to take what I've written and make it better. I want them to elevate what I've done. So that's kind of what I look for when I work with voice actors.
Okay. And like when designing the various puzzles in the Blackwell games, did you feel like, or did you ever receive any feedback that made you feel like your games were ever hit with like the type of, you know, moon logic that has been known to affect more than a few adventure games since like the genre
I,
was invented?
the funny thing is, people always ask me about puzzles, and it's like the most common criticism of all the games that I've personally written is that they're too easy. As I don't like puzzles too much. I don't
Mm-hmm.
design a lot of puzzles. I'm not really good at them. And like, if there's ever a point in one of my games where it's really puzzly, it's always like the worst part of the game because I'm not very good at it. It's not really my strength, so I don't push it too hard. I do know that when the biggest feedback I got, was, I think it was after the second game, and it was a classic case of misunderstanding feedback. Was that a lot of folks did not like the notebook combined the note combining interface. I got a lot of complaints about that, and so for Blackwell Convergence, for the third game, I removed it. And then, sure enough, when that game came out, everyone was like, "Where's the notebook combining interface? We really liked that." So, like, wait, what's going on here? Mixed messages, and I realized I was reading the feedback and wrong. Um, the feedback wasn't necessarily that they wanted the notebook interface to go away; it was that I was implementing it badly. It's that often, when you in your head, when you combine a clue in your head and come up to a conclusion, um, in your head you've done the work already, and so you don't think to actually manually combine the clues in the game, because in your head you've already done the work. So that frustrated a lot of people. So what I deliberately tailored those clue combining puzzles to be to involve things that you could not combine in your head. Like if you have a list of names and a set of initials, you couldn't do that in your head. So it's very natural to do that within the game. So you can solve the puzzle that way. And then people genuinely liked the notebook combining interface after that. So um, I wouldn't call that moon logic exactly, but it is kind of a guess what the developer is thinking before I redesigned how I handled it.
Okay. And like one of the things I noticed when I first booted up like the first Blackwell game is that you recorded like two different commentary sets. One from like what was 5 years 5 years ago at the time of the game's release, and one
Oh
that
yeah.
was slightly more current. What made you want to record like two different sets of commentaries on the games?
Because I think at the 5 year anniversary was I finally got the games accepted to Steam.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time it was a lot more of a walled garden. Getting on Steam was a big deal. Um, Now it's getting on Steam is like the baseline of what you have to do to sell a game. Like any game can pretty much get on Steam, but back then, like 2010, 2011, getting on Steam was really hard. And when you did, it was like relaunching the game for the very first time. And so I did a couple of things. Originally, the first Blackwell game was the character of Rosa was voiced by somebody else. Her name was Sandy Chen, but for Convergence, she wasn't able to come back. So I recast the role with Rebecca, and Rebecca did Convergence and Deception. And by that point, she was cemented in my head as Rosa. And so when the games got accepted to Steam, I decided, well, it's like launching it again for the first time. So I re-recorded Rosa with Rebecca for Legacy to have it all consistent. And while I was changing stuff, I decided, well, it's been 5 years since the game came out. I'll record a new commentary just to have like additional thoughts and kind of make it a little more special to for players who maybe want to try to encourage people to go back and buy the game again or play the game again. So I recorded that just to sort of talk about how far I had come since I had released that. And it's funny at the time, 5 years seemed like a long time, but now it's 15. But I think most of the anniversary commentary track was mostly me saying, "I'm really sorry I did that. I would do that a lot differently now. I'm sorry I did it that way."
Okay, and yeah, it was like I found out just looking stuff up on the Blackwell games, like the final game, and not wishing to give anything away to anyone who might be interested in, is like hit me and a lot of other people like a truck, and
Oh, I don't know
like
whether to say thank you or I'm sorry.
and was that all? Was it your always your intention to end the final Blackwell game the way it ended, or like was it like partway through the process you realized that I feel like the game could be like wrapped up nicely if I ended it on this note?
I had the idea for that ending. Um, I wasn't quite sure where it was going at first, and then as I was working on Unbound, I don't remember what the song was, but I was here. I heard some song on the radio, and for some reason, like that ending just came to me. Um, it just seemed like a natural end for like, yeah, it just sort of came to me, and I always had that ending in mind. I was never quite sure how I was going to get there, but it was the ending I always had in mind. Yeah, almost from the beginning, and I changed many things. I changed many things over the course of the series from my original design. Um, but that was the one thing I managed to keep, and I'm kind of proud of that.
Okay. And and yeah, so I guess nothing left to it but the final question on the list, which, everyone on this show has always understood perfectly. There's never been any confusion ever. I'm not even sure where you'd even get that idea. So, Dave, in your opinion, is video games?
Only on Tuesdays. That's my answer.
All right, then.
I don't know. I saw that question and I'm like, I assume it's a joke. I hope it's a joke. I'm just gonna say, yeah, okay.
And yeah, with that, we come to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast.
That was easy.
Yeah, I would like to thank Dave Gilbert
Do
for
something hard next time.
for joining me, and hopefully you'll be able to join us again as I
Sure.
slowly play through the entire catalog of your games, which will take me years, just because doing anything for several hours takes me forever. But yeah,
They are not going anywhere, so whenever you're ready, the games will be there.
I mean, I did manage to snag Gemini Rue during the Steam winter sale, so
Oh, cool.
I know what I'm doing to get my next point and click
That
fix.
was the game that kind of put us on the map.
So yeah, the Blackwell Games. If you enjoy mysteries, point and clicks, and ghosts of various levels of spooky, you can find them all on Steam for probably quite the reasonable price. And if any of you at home have enjoyed me rambling to and at Dave here, and you like what you're hearing, you can like and subscribe and all that. Hit that little bell icon so you get notifications, because everyone loves extra steps. And after you give Dave money by buying all of the Blackwell games, if you have any left over and you want to give me some money, because the Pumpkin Copter Cast, one of its founding principles is absolutely shameless self-promotion. You can go to patreon.com/thepumpkincoptercast, where for as little as $1 a month you can submit questions for me to use in future interviews. And yeah, before we sign out, Dave, is there anything you wish to promote that hasn't been mentioned here today?
No, we've pretty much touched on everything.
Okay, so yeah. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, and as I say at the end of every show, have a gourd day, everyone.
Have a gore day. Whoop. Okay. Well, thanks for having me.